The cloth napkin was still warm from the iron. I had folded each one by hand just like Mama taught me. 2 creases, press flat, tuck the edge. There were 16, all stitched with tiny red apples. My signature. Julia used to love them. Said they made the table feel real. Said it felt like home. Now they were in a grocery bag on the floor. She had switched to disposable. Just easier, she said. I stood at the edge of the dining room watching her glide past me in that cream sweater, setting down wine glasses like she had done it alone her whole life. The table was beautiful. Candles in little gold holders. White tulips in a glass pitcher. Labeled cards for everyone. I leaned forward. Scanning. Rick. Julia. The kids. Her in-laws. Even the neighbors. But not me. My name wasn't there. Not even a blank card. Nothing. At the end of the table where I had always sat there was a booster seat. A pink one. Already strapped in. Already occupied. No one said anything. Not Julia. Not Rick. Not even the kids. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger. Not even hurt. Just smaller. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon. My stuffing still warm in the pan. Nobody had touched it. Mom, Julia said, would you mind sitting in the sunroom today? It's just with the baby and all. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I nodded. Picked up my coat from the hook. Slid the dish towel off my shoulder. I left before anyone noticed. Dot's place was still open. The light soft yellow like always. Like James liked it. I took the booth by the window. The one where we used to sit every Sunday after church. The waitress didn't ask. She just poured me a coffee and said cream right. I nodded. Looked out at the quiet street. A girl on a bike passed, streamers trailing from her handlebars. Inside, the radio crackled softly. Old country tune. My favorite. I reached into my purse, pulled out the cloth napkin I had saved. Unfolded it slowly. Laid it on the table like it still meant something. And I thought, if they can take your place at the table without even blinking, maybe it's time to build one where no one has to ask. The house felt colder when I stepped back in. I set the stuffing down on the stove. No one had taken a bite. It was still full. Still warm. Still waiting. I slipped off my coat, the scent of rosemary following me like an afterthought. That scent used to mean something. Holiday. Home. Not anymore. The kitchen light buzzed faintly above me. I did not turn it off. I stood there a while, listening to nothing, watching the steam rise from a dish that no longer had a place at the table. James would have said something. He always did. Even when his voice got too soft near the end. He had a way of putting his hand on my back and making the room feel less sharp. I looked at the photo on the fridge. Julia at 10. Missing teeth, freckled face. She was standing in front of Dot's place holding a giant chocolate milkshake. Back then, she begged to go every Sunday. Your pancakes are good, Mama, she once said, but Dot put strawberries on top. I didn't mind. Back then, she still held my hand when we crossed the street. I reached for the photo, but stopped. The magnet was loose. It slid slightly to the left, just enough to feel like something shifting. I left it crooked. That night I did not heat up the stuffing. I did not call Julia. I did not cry. Instead, I sat on the couch and folded napkins. Red apple thread. The kind Mama taught me to stitch. My own daughter stopped using them. Paper's easier, she said. Easier. The words stayed in my chest. I folded them anyway. 16 napkins. One for each person who used to fit around that table. But none for me. The house felt colder when I stepped back in. I set the stuffing down on the stove. No one had taken a bite. It was still full. Still warm. Still waiting. I slipped off my coat, the scent of rosemary, following me like an afterthought. That scent used to mean something. Holiday. Home. Not anymore. The kitchen light buzzed faintly above me. I did not turn it off. I stood there a while, listening to nothing, watching the steam rise from a dish that no longer had a place at the table. James would have said something. He always did. Even when his voice got too soft near the end. He had a way of putting his hand on my back and making the room feel less sharp. I looked at the photo on the fridge. Julia, at 10. Missing teeth, freckled face. She was standing in front of Dot's place holding a giant chocolate milkshake. Back then, she begged to go every Sunday. "Your pancakes are good, Mama," she once said, but Dot put strawberries on top. I didn't mind. Back then she still held my hand when we crossed the street. I reached for the photo, but stopped. The magnet was loose. It slid slightly to the left, just enough to feel like something shifting. I left it crooked. That night I did not heat up the stuffing. I did not call Julia. I did not cry. Instead, I sat on the couch and folded napkins. Red apple thread. The kind Mama taught me to stitch. My own daughter stopped using them. "Paper's easier," she said. Easier. The word stayed in my chest. It echoed. Like shoes on an empty floor. Like cutlery in a drawer no one opens. I ran my fingers along the edge of the cloth. The stitching was uneven in places. Old hands. Old eyes. But still mine. Still made with care. Still waiting to be useful. I laid them out on the coffee table. 16 perfect squares. One for each person who used to sit around that table I scrubbed every holiday morning. That table that now had no room for me. That table that once held laughter, and now held names I no longer recognized. I sat there a long time. Hands in my lap. Eyes on the napkins. And a thought came, quiet but clear. If love makes room, then what do you call what they left for me? The next morning, I found myself walking toward Dot's place without meaning to. The wind was sharp. Carried the scent of wood smoke and wet leaves. It clung to my coat like the memory of something simpler. The bell above the door jingled as it always had. Not loud. Just enough to say, "You're home." Inside the light was soft. Amber-colored, the kind that forgives wrinkles and remembers your name. April looked up from behind the counter. "Well, look who the wind carried in," she smiled, already reaching for the coffee pot. I smiled back, though it did not quite reach my eyes. I slid into my usual booth. The one by the window. The vinyl seat sighed beneath me as if it too remembered. The sun cut a square of light across the table. Dust floated in it like slow dancers. The coffee came chipped mug white with a green rim. Still warm in my hands. Still heavier than I remembered. "Cream, 1 sugar?" she asked. I nodded. She had remembered. No one else had. Not even Julia. Last week, she had handed me a to-go box before I finished my plate. Said they needed the table for the little ones. Like I was in the way. Like I was furniture they forgot how to dust. I stared at the coffee. The steam rose slowly. Time moved differently in this booth. Gentler. The table had a scratch near the edge. James made that mark dragging his watch across it one morning while cutting his waffles too fast. I never had the heart to sand it out. Some scratches you keep on purpose. April refilled my mug without asking. Then leaned in close, eyes low. "They're thinking of closing," she whispered. He blinked. Who, I asked, though I already knew. "Mr. Glenn," she said. "Back's giving out, says he can't run it much longer." I looked around. Same curtains. Same menu board with letters missing. Same smell of burnt toast and something sweet. Dot's place was still standing. Still trying. Like me. I sipped my coffee and something inside settled. Not fixed. Not healed. Just quieter. Out the window, a boy rode past on a bike, his scarf flapping behind him like a banner for things not yet forgotten. I watched him go, then looked down at my mug. It was empty again. But I didn't feel hollow. I traced the rim of the cup with the tip of my finger. The glaze was chipped in places, but it still held heat. Like me, there was something sacred about being remembered without having to ask. April didn't rush me, no one asked me to move. No one looked at their watch or offered me a to-go lid. For once, I was allowed to stay. Not for what I brought. Not for what I cooked. But just for being there. The kind of presence that once built a whole family, now forgotten, except in places like this. Dot's place had not changed much since the first time James brought me here. It was a Tuesday. Raining hard. He said, "You like waffles," I said, "I like being warm." We split a plate. He gave me the crisp edges. Always did. We sat by the window, same booth I sat in now. The one that felt like mine before anything else ever did. Julia was born 2 years later. We brought her here every Sunday after church. She always got extra syrup. James wiped her hands with his napkin and told her sticky fingers meant happy hearts. She believed that. So did I. There was a stretch of years when this place felt like the center of our little world. High chairs and spilled orange juice. Crayons on placemats. Julia's curls bouncing as she climbed into my lap. We did not have much money. But we had ritual. We had rhythm. Even after James passed, I came here alone. At first, just to feel close to him, later, because silence at home got too loud. This booth became a place where I was still a person, not just a role. Not just Nana or Mom or extra guest. Just Lorraine. Woman. Wife. Widow. Still here. I ran my hand along the edge of the table, pausing at the scratch he made. It was small. Most people would not notice. But I did. Every time. April came by again. Slid me a refill, then a lemon square on a napkin. "On the house," she whispered. "Mr. Glenn said you used to be a regular." He smiled. "Still My voice caught a little. But I meant it. I was still something here. Still known. Still counted. Outside, the rain had started again. The kind that taps gently like someone asking permission to remember. I stayed a while. Longer than I meant to. Finished the lemon square. Watched the steam fade from my cup. And when I stood to leave, I looked back at the booth like you do when leaving a grave. Not in mourning. But in honor. That table remembered me. Even when my own family no longer did. As I stood there, hand resting on the booth's edge, I remembered something Julia once said. She was 7. Missing her front teeth. Spilled chocolate milk down her shirt and giggled like it was magic. She had looked up at me and said, "When I'm big, I want to eat here with my kids. Just like you and Daddy do." I nodded back, then heart full. Thinking legacy was a kind of echo you pass down quietly. But echoes fade, especially when no one listens. I had become a shadow in the family I helped build. Present but peripheral. It hurt in a quiet way. Not sharp. Not sudden. Just constant. Like a hum in the walls you stop noticing until one day it disappears. And all you're left with is silence. That evening, I returned home to a house that did not miss me. The lights stayed off. The silence didn't shift when I opened the door. I stepped out of my shoes. Folded my coat over the chair. No one pulled out for me anymore. The stuffing was still on the stove. Cold now. Congealed at the edges. I scraped it into the trash without tasting a bite. The sound it made, soft and final, stayed in the air longer than it should have. I stood at the sink, hands resting on porcelain, staring out the window at the dark yard James once mowed every Saturday morning. The wind had knocked over the bird feeder. It lay sideways in the grass, spilling seed into the frost. No one would fix it. Not Julia. Not Rick. Not the children I once read bedtime stories to while their parents took a break upstairs. I had become background. The one who stirred the gravy, wrapped the leftovers, drove home in silence. Even my seat in the van was now next to the cooler. Julia's voice from the week before echoed in my head. Mom, can you sit in the sunroom today? We're short on chairs. Short on chairs. In a house I helped pay for. At a table I used to polish with lemon oil and care. I walked into the dining room. The red apple napkins were still in a neat stack on the corner buffet. No one asked where they came from. No one noticed they were gone. I touched the fabric. Ran my thumb across the stitching. Still held. I thought of April's words that morning. They're thinking of closing. Dot's place had no linen napkins. No centerpiece. No place cards. But it had something I had not felt in a long time: belonging. Not because I had earned it. Not because I had brought anything. Just because I showed up. I sat down in the chair by the window. The one James always called the lookout. The house hummed faintly. The heater clicked on. Somewhere, a floorboard sighed. I held the red napkins in my lap, cradled like small flags. They used to mean home. Now they felt like memory pressed into cotton. And I wondered if there was still one place left where I could set them down and be seen. The next Sunday, they did not call. No invitation, no reminder, no "see you at 3. I waited until noon, then dressed anyway. Just in case. Red sweater. Gold pin shaped like a dove. The one James gave me on our 30th anniversary. I made deviled eggs. Added paprika on top. Julia once said they were too much work, but she ate 4 in one sitting. At 2:15 in the afternoon, I called her. The line rang twice. Then voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Just sat back down, eggs still warm on the counter. At 3:07 in the afternoon, she sent a text. Sorry Mom, we ended up at Rick's sister's. Totally last minute. That was all. No photo. No plate saved. No next time. I stood in the kitchen, phone still in hand. The silence pressed in from every side. I opened the fridge. Made room for the eggs between 2 half-eaten casseroles I had brought the week before. I closed the door softly. Like noise would break something already cracked. Later that week, I stopped by unannounced. It was a Wednesday. Sunlight, soft air, holding the smell of turning leaves. The front door was open. I could hear the kids laughing inside. I knocked gently. No one answered. When I stepped in, Julia looked up from the table. Her eyes widened. Mom. I held up a bag. Just brought some soup. Thought maybe. Oh, she cut in, her smile too quick. We actually just had lunch. Rick's mom brought over lasagna. I stood there, soup still warm in my hands. I'll just leave it in the fridge, I said. She didn't stop me. In the kitchen, the fridge was full. But not with anything I had made. Store-brand hummus. Tiny plastic fruit cups. Labeled containers with neat handwriting that was not mine. I placed the soup on the bottom shelf. It didn't fit. I rearranged things until it did. Then closed the door with both hands. From the hallway, I heard Julia say, Grandma's just dropping something off. Guys. She won't stay. She won't stay. Not can't. Not doesn't want to. Won't. I left quietly. No hugs. No hellos from the kids. Not even a wave from Rick. Just the door clicking shut behind me like punctuation. That night, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off. The red apple napkins were still on the table. Still folded. Still waiting for a meal no one would eat. I thought about calling again. Just to say hi. Just to hear their voices. But what would I even say? Hi, it's the person you used to save a seat for. Hi, it's the hands that raised you, now carrying soup you will not taste. Instead, I opened the drawer with all the cards they had ever given me. Birthday cards. Mother's Day cards. Hand-drawn ones with crooked letters and glitter glued too thick. One said, "You're the heart of this family." Another, "I hope I grow up to be just like you." I laid them out on the floor. All 23 of them. Lined them up in rows like place cards at a long invisible table. My fingers hovered above each one. The handwriting had changed over time. The stickers neater. The words shorter. Some were signed "Love, Julia." Others just J. The last one was dated 5 years ago. A thank you card for watching the kids when they took a trip to Tahoe. There was a scribble in the corner. A smiley face drawn by Olivia. 3 years old at the time. Now she barely says hello. I gathered the cards slowly. Pressed them back into the drawer like something fragile. Like something that should have lasted longer. The next day, I went to Dot's place again. The bell over the door welcomed me with its same soft chime. The booths were mostly empty. I took my usual seat. Pressed my palm flat against the table. April came over. She looked tired. Eyes a little red. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded. Then added, "Rough day." She nodded back. Slow. "And Mr. Glenn told me to start looking for other work." I stared at her. She shrugged. "Says this place is too much for one old man to manage." I glanced around. Cracked linoleum. Sunday faded signs. A menu that hadn't changed since the 70s. Still, it was the only place that remembered my name without needing a calendar alert. April poured my coffee. Steam rose gently. I looked out the window. Leaves drifting from the maple trees like quiet resignation. And for the first time, I wondered, if a place like this disappeared, where would women like me go? Not the young ones with yoga mats and brunch reservations, but the ones who wore rings from men buried too soon, who remembered birthdays by baking pies, not posting captions. Where would we sit when the tables we built no longer had room? On Saturday, I arrived early. I had promised to bring my famous pecan pie for Julia's fall potluck. She said to come whenever. So I came at 10 in the morning, just like I always used to when she still let me set the table. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon candles and something from a box mix. I heard laughter from the back patio. Children shouting. Music playing low. I stepped into the kitchen and set the pie gently on the counter. Beside it were 2 other pies, store-bought. In plastic containers, with red lids and tiny white labels. One read pumpkin gluten-free. The other apple no sugar added. Mine had no label. Just butter and memory. Julia came in holding a bundle of paper cups. She paused when she saw me. "Oh, you're early." Her voice had a lilt, like she was trying not to sound inconvenienced. "I brought the pie," I said softly. She looked at it. Smiled a little. Then said, "Thanks, but I think we have desserts covered." I blinked. "Covered?" She nodded. "Rick's sister picked up everything yesterday. We're trying to keep it simple." I stared at the pie. Still warm. Still smelling like the Thanksgivings James loved best. "I made it for Olivia," I said. "She always asks for second helpings." Julia glanced away. "She's been off nuts lately." I placed both hands on the edge of the counter. It steadied me. "Should I just take it home?" then I asked. She hesitated. "Maybe we'll set it out later," she offered. I knew that tone. I had used it once with my own mother long ago, when I still thought time was unlimited. I nodded. She walked back outside, without another word. I stood in the kitchen a moment longer. Then opened the fridge. Not to make room. Just to look. It was full of dips and drinks and salads in mason jars. Nothing homemade. Nothing folded in cloth. Nothing that reminded anyone of me. I closed it quietly. Then I picked up the pie still warm in my hands and left without saying goodbye. The sky had turned gray. Leaves scattered across the driveway. I placed the pie on the passenger seat. Buckled it in without irony. At the stoplight, I looked at the bakery sticker on the pie Julia had chosen. It said, "Baked with love." I almost laughed. Because sometimes, what you bake with is grief. Grief and eggs. Grief and flour. Grief and all the places they no longer want you to go. It started with a casual sentence. One of those phrases dropped in passing like a fork clinking against china. "We're thinking of refinancing," Julia said, pouring herself more iced tea. We were sitting on her new patio. Pavers just installed. Outdoor string lights already up, though it was barely spring. I nodded slowly. "Refinancing what, honey?" She waved her hand like it was nothing. "Oh, the house, of course. Rates are low. Rick talked to a friend at the bank." My tea sat untouched. The house. This house. The same one James and I had helped them buy. We cashed out a life insurance policy to cover the down payment. Moved into a rental 2 blocks from the train line. Thin walls. Rattling heat. "It's just for a couple years," Julia had said back then. "Then we'll get things stable and put your name back on." But the years passed. No paperwork arrived. No title came in the mail. Just birthdays. Just hand-drawn cards. Just a slow rearranging of what belonged to whom. I sipped the tea. It tasted like lemon but left no sweetness behind. "That sounds like a big step," I said. She smiled. "It's all under control, Mom. Rick's managing it." I wanted to ask, managing what? Who owns what? Do you remember where this house came from? But I didn't. Because the kids were laughing in the yard. Because I still remembered when Julia needed me to sign every form and explain what escrow meant. Now she asked me to bring napkins. The kind you throw away. Later that night I went home and pulled out the folder. The thick blue one with home papers written in black ink across the front. Inside, everything was still there. The deed from 20 years ago. The transfer agreement. The temporary arrangement. My name. Her name. And a small sticky note I had written in pencil. For Julia one day, but not yet. Not yet. But somehow, that day had already passed. Without a word. Without a thank you. Just like the place at the table. Just like the photo on the fridge. I turned the pages slowly. Each one felt heavier than the last. At the bottom was a single sheet from the title company. Stamped. Dated. Signed. It had only one name. And it was no longer mine. I stared at the document longer than I should have. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. Every word. Every date. Every signature that wasn't mine. The transfer had gone through 2 years ago. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. I traced the embossed seal with my thumb. It felt cold. Final. Like a lock clicking shut. The house I helped buy no longer had my name. Not even in the fine print. I wanted to scream. But nothing came out. Just a soundless ache that settled in my chest and made everything heavier. I pulled the sticky note from the front of the folder. Held it between 2 fingers. The pencil had faded. But the words were still there. For Julia one day, but not yet. Not yet. But they had decided yet without me. They had cashed in my trust like it was a check already made out to them. The next morning, I showed up unannounced. Julia opened the door in workout clothes. Surprised but not alarmed. "Is everything okay?" I held up the blue folder. No words. Just the weight of it. She stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table. The one I had stained with coffee years ago while teaching her how to balance a budget. I slid the paper across the surface. She glanced at it, then looked away. "Oh," she said, her voice too casual, like we were talking about curtains. "I thought Rick told you. We had to finalize things to qualify for the loan." Without asking me, I whispered. She winced. It was just easier. That word again. Easier. I stood up. The folder still open. The sticky note now creased in the middle. "You used my money," I said quietly. She didn't deny it. Didn't apologize either. "It's all the same, isn't it?" she said. "We're family. Family." That word used to warm me. Now it stung. I looked at the kitchen. The backsplash I helped install. The oven I researched because she wanted the one with double racks. The high chair I bought from a thrift store and painted by hand. All still here. All still in use. But somehow, I was not. They had kept everything except me. That evening, I sat in my car outside the house I used to call mine. The porch light flickered. A spider web stretched across the mailbox I once painted robin's egg blue. Inside, I could see them moving. Shadows in the kitchen. Laughter through the glass. They didn't know I was still parked there. Or maybe they did. And it didn't matter. I thought about knocking. One last confrontation. A demand for explanation. For decency. But I didn't. Because something inside me had finally gone quiet. Not broken. Just settled. They had made their choice. And it wasn't me. I drove home slowly, the streets half-lit and familiar. Dot's place came into view. Dark windows. Closed sign hanging. But still there. Still standing. I parked across the street, engine ticking softly as it cooled. I watched the diner for a long while. Thought about the way April always remembered my order. The way the booth by the window knew the shape of my grief. Then I thought about the kitchen I was no longer welcome in. The table where no one saved me a seat. I had spent so many years building a life for others. Creating safety. Holding space. And somehow, in the end I had become extra. Not essential. Not foundational. Just a leftover they had decided they could store, or discard. The next morning, I called a lawyer. His voice was crisp. Professional. "Do you have proof of financial contribution?" he asked. "I do," I said. "Receipts. Bank transfers. The life insurance paperwork James and I signed in a room that smelled like vinyl chairs and stale coffee." "And do you still have a relationship with the occupants?" he continued. I paused. Then answered, "Number. Not the kind that matters." He cleared his throat. "Well, there are options," he said carefully. "But reclaiming something once signed away is rarely clean." I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence. I didn't want the house back. Not really. I just wanted what I had given to mean something. I walked to the kitchen, took the red apple napkins from the drawer, folded each one gently. Then I opened the cupboard and pulled down a small mason jar, labeled in James's handwriting. Just in case. Inside, $87 in rolled bills. Loose change. A note that said, "For her peace. Whatever that means someday." I sat at the table, placed the note beside my teacup, and whispered aloud. "It means not waiting for them to say sorry. Because they never would." It had been 12 days since anyone from the house called me. Not Julia. Not Rick. Not even a quick emoji from one of the kids. I told myself it was fine. That they were busy. That modern families just drift. But in the quiet, I knew better. You don't call what happened to me drifting. You call it being released from orbit. A slow, unspoken exit from a center you once held. On the 13th morning, I opened the front door to find the local paper folded wrong. The crossword was missing. Someone had torn it out before delivery. I stood there barefoot in my robe, holding the incomplete news in my hand like it meant something. Like maybe that too had been taken from me. Back inside, the kettle whistled too long. I poured tea over an old bag. It tasted like boiled air. I sat in James's chair. It still creaked in the same spot. But now the sound felt less like memory and more like mockery. I turned on the radio. Static. Switched it off. Even the background noise had grown tired of trying. Later I walked to the pharmacy. The cashier was new. Didn't know my name. Didn't comment on my hair like Marta used to. At the corner, I passed a chalkboard signed Sunday brunch now served at Rosie's. Rosie's. The cafe that replaced Henderson's. Where Julia once spilled cocoa in my lap and cried like her world had ended. Now she ordered mimosas there. Tagged her photos number family vibes. I had become a ghost in my own town. Not bitter. Just erased. That night, I opened the drawer of birthday candles. They were still in a Ziploc bag. Still mismatched. Some tall. Some stubby. Some bent from heat. I touched the pink one from Olivia's 5th birthday. I had baked her a cake shaped like a mermaid tail. She cried when it collapsed. But then she hugged me and said it was still magic. I sat on the kitchen floor, knees pulled to my chest, and held that candle like a relic. No tears came. Just an ache behind my ribs that pulsed like a bruise. The fridge hummed behind me. Faint. Indifferent. There was soup still in the back. Untouched. And suddenly, I thought, what happens when everything you've ever given goes uneaten? What happens when you're no longer angry, just no longer needed? I didn't know the answer. Only that the silence around me had stopped being soft. It had become the only voice I heard. 2 days later, I passed by Julia's house again. I hadn't planned to. My feet just turned. Old habit. Like retracing a scar. The lights were on. Voices drifted from the backyard. Laughter. The sound of clinking glasses. I slowed just enough to see. String lights. Tidy chairs. And a table. A long wooden one new. I remembered the one it replaced. James and I had built it. Sanded it ourselves. Laid the planks in the garage and stained them until our fingers turned chestnut brown. That table had held 32 birthdays, 5 Thanksgiving turkeys, and more late-night apologies than anyone kept track of. It was gone now. I wondered if they sold it. Or if it ended up at the dump forgotten, like a casserole dish left in someone's trunk. I didn't knock. I turned away. Walked until my legs ached. When I got home, the porch light flickered again. I didn't bother fixing it. Inside, the silence met me like an old acquaintance. Familiar. Not friendly. I poured myself a bowl of cereal. There was no milk. I ate it dry. Each bite loud in the quiet. Afterward, I sat at the kitchen table and opened an old photo album. Not the digital kind. The kind with pages that stick. James on page 1. Smiling with paint on his cheek. Julia on page 2. 5 years old. Missing her front teeth. The 3 of us at Dot's place. Her birthday breakfast. She wore a paper crown. I had forgotten that. The booth behind her was peeling. The waitress looked tired. Still we smiled. I flipped the page. More memories. All edged in dust. My hand stilled on a photo of the old red truck we sold to help with her college tuition. I remember how she cried when we gave her the check. Too much, she said. We called it love. Now it felt like a withdrawal, with no receipt. I closed the album. Put the pink candle back in the drawer. and asked myself a question I had never said aloud. If I disappeared, not died, just stopped showing up, who would notice first? The answer wasn't Julia, or Rick, or the kids. It was April. From Dot's place. With her chipped nail polish and tired jokes and hands that still poured warmth without asking for anything back. She would notice. Not because I mattered, but because I was seen. That night I dreamed I was sitting at a table alone until someone pulled up a chair and didn't speak. Just stayed. And I woke up with tears on my neck and a name on my lips. Not Julia. Not Rick. Dot. Not a person. A place. The last place I still belonged. I woke up before the sun. Not because I had somewhere to be, but because I couldn't stay asleep. The house held a kind of stillness that didn't soothe anymore. It just reminded me that no one would be knocking. I made oatmeal. Ate it standing. Then pulled on James's old windbreaker and walked. The air smelled like frost, even though it was spring. My breath followed me like a ghost down the quiet sidewalks. Dot's place was already open. The open sign blinked, tired but certain. I pushed the door. The bell gave its usual hum, soft and unbothered. April looked up from the counter. Her hair was in a messy bun. She smiled. "You're early." I slid into the booth. The same one I always chose. Window seat. Left side. "I couldn't sleep," I said. April nodded. "I never do either. Not since I got this place on mornings." She poured the coffee without asking. The sound of it was more comforting than any apology I had waited for and never got. I wrapped my hands around the mug. Let the heat press into my palms. Outside the street was still empty. But in here, something felt possible. April leaned on the counter. "I think Mr. Glenn's finally giving up." I looked up. "Giving up?" She shrugged. "He wants to sell. Says he's too old to manage payroll and plumbing in the same week." He blinks. "Dot's place for sale." It felt like hearing your childhood library was being turned into condos. "I thought this place would outlive us all," I said. April laughed softly. "It might. Just not like this." She moved to refill the sugar tray. I stared at the walls. The old jukebox. The dented pie case. The photo of Dot herself, big glasses, flower on her cheek, grinning like someone who never asked permission to be joyful. I looked down at my coffee. Then said almost to myself, "Places like this shouldn't go quietly." April paused. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Because something in me had started to move. Not like rage. Not even grief. Just a knowing. A shift in the soil where roots might grow again. Not in their house. Not at their table. But here in a place that still knew how to hold warmth. The next morning I came back. Same booth. Same mug. April handed me the menu, then stopped herself. "You know it by heart, don't you?" I nodded. But I still looked at it. Because looking felt like honoring something. I ordered the usual. But asked for extra toast. "Got company?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just hungry." But it wasn't hunger. It was something else. A pull I couldn't name. When she walked away, I opened my notebook. The small one I kept in my purse for grocery lists and quotes I never shared. I turned to a blank page and wrote one word at the top. Space. Then another. Enough. I wasn't planning anything. Not really. I just needed to see the words. Needed proof that I still had ideas that belonged only to me. April returned with the plate. 2 slices of toast. Perfectly golden. I thanked her. Then asked, "Do you know what he's asking for the place?" She blinked. "The diner." I nodded. She rubbed her forehead. Not sure. But he mentioned 6 figures. 6 figures. I winced. Then looked out the window. Where would I even start? Then I remembered the mason jar. The envelope in the drawer. The old joint account James had never closed before he passed. I had never touched it. Because it was for someday. And maybe someday was knocking. April sat across from me. She was off the clock now. Her apron folded on the seat beside her. You thinking of buying it? She asked, half joking. I didn't answer. Just tore a corner of napkin and wrote down numbers. Ballpark. Nothing real. Just dreams dressed up in decimals and ink. She leaned over. You serious? I met her eyes. Would you stay if I did? She blinked. Then smiled. Are you offering me a job, Miss Ruth? I hadn't meant to say my name aloud. But it was there. Warm in the booth. Floating with the smell of burnt edges and overbrewed coffee. I'm not sure what I'm offering, I said. But I know what I'm tired of. April nodded slowly. And what's that? I folded the napkin in half, waiting for someone else to make room for me. She didn't speak, but she reached across the table and tapped the edge of the notebook. Then maybe it's time you build the table yourself. That night I opened the drawer beneath the stove. The one James used to call our little vault. Inside receipts, notebooks, an envelope marked Bridge if needed. We had always used Bridge as code for the thing that carries us when everything else gives way. I pulled out the envelope. Counted slowly. Then opened the safe in the bedroom. It took 2 tries to remember the code. Our anniversary. Backwards. Inside the old joint account documents still active. We never closed it because we didn't know how to close something that still felt like us. By morning I had a list. Not of what I needed, but of what I already had. April's trust. My name on a small forgotten account. The will to build something even if no one clapped. I returned to Dot's place. This time, I asked April for Mr. Glenn's number. She handed it over with a long, careful look. You sure? I nodded. Then paused. No. But I'm ready. I called him from the payphone beside the laundromat. His voice was raspy. Tired. But polite. I asked if the place was really for sale. He said yes. Gave a figure. It wasn't low. But it wasn't impossible. I'll need time, I said. He laughed. So did I. We hung up. And just like that, it began. No fanfare. No big speech. Just a woman walking home with a number in her pocket and something unnameable settling into her chest. I didn't tell Julia. I didn't tell anyone. Some things grow better when they're quiet. Instead, I spent my evenings at the diner, asking questions. Watching April wipe the same counter with muscle memory and invisible pride. I watched the way people lit up when they were seen. When their coffee arrived just how they liked it without having to ask twice. One night, a man came in crying. Saturday at the booth across from mine. Didn't order. Just sat. April brought him pie. Said nothing. He took one bite and whispered, "Thank you." She just nodded. That was the moment I knew. You do not need balloons or banners to start again. You only need a table and a slice of something warm and the will to say you belong here. So I wrote the check. Signed the papers. And for the first time in a very long while, I walked into a place that I owned with nothing in my hands, except everything they thought I had lost. Sometimes, starting over means reclaiming spaces no one thought were yours to claim. Have you ever rebuilt something quietly just for yourself? We would be honored to hear your story. You are not invisible. You never were. This is Grandma Radio, where second chances come served with warmth. Owning a diner did not feel like victory. It felt like keys that jingled with uncertainty. Mr. Glenn left me a list. Vendors, suppliers, names of plumbers who answered late but charged double. I taped the list above the register. Watched it flutter every time the door opened. April stayed. She showed me the rhythm of the place, how the grill hissed loudest at 7:20, how the coffee ran low right before the lunch crowd. She taught me how to fold the receipt tape so it never jammed, and how to smile at the delivery guy even when he forgot the pickles. At night, I stayed late. Not to clean. Just to listen. The hum of the fridge. The ticking of the wall clock. The soft whine of a stool being pulled out of habit. I sat at the counter with James's windbreaker on, and an old ledger open beside me. I wasn't good with numbers. But I was good with people. So I wrote down names. Faces. Those who came alone but smiled when they left. Then I made another list. Carol still wears black on Tuesdays. Nina never finishes her toast. Mr. Blake always says next time but never orders dessert. I called it the ones who stay. And then I had a thought. What if this place could become more than a place? What if it became a refuge? Not loud. Not flashy. But steady. Like a porch light left on. I ran my hand along the counter. The wood was scarred. Worn smooth by elbows and weighting. But it held. Just like I had. April walked out from the back with a rag in her hand. "You're still here?" she asked. I smiled. "Making plans." She grinned. "Dangerous at your age." I shrugged. "So is silence." She laughed. Then grew quiet. "You're changing things, aren't you?" I looked around. The empty booths. The jukebox that hadn't worked in years. The chipped sugar jars. "No," I said softly. "I'm remembering them." And in that remembering I began. Quietly. With a new coat of paint. With handwritten menus. With thank you notes tucked under plates when no one was looking. Not to impress. But to say I see you. Because sometimes the best way to reclaim your place at the table is to build a table where no one gets turned away. I started with Sundays. Not the busiest day. But the quietest. The kind where time stretches and the coffee flows slower. I posted a small sign in the corner of the window. Sunday mornings. Bring a story, get a slice. April raised an eyebrow. "You bribing them with pie?" I smiled. "Number. I'm reminding them, they still matter." The first week, only 3 came. Mr. Blake. Carol. And a woman named Letty I'd never seen before but who said the word lonely like it was her mailing address. They sat in separate booths. Didn't speak. So I sat with them. One by one. No clipboard. No camera. Just presence. Letty talked about her cat. Carol brought a photo of her late husband. Mr. Blake cried halfway through his story and apologized for making the napkin wet. "No charge for tears," I said. The next Sunday, there were 7. April baked extra. Peach crumble this time. She asked, "Is this a thing now?" I said, "Only if they come back." They did. By the 3rd week someone brought flowers. By the 4th someone played piano on the old upright Dot used to keep for holidays. It was off-key. No one minded. I started keeping a jar on the shelf near the register. A sign read for coffee or courage. People dropped in quarters notes, sometimes just a button or a prayer. It was never full, but never empty. Then April had an idea. What if we made space just for the ones who don't have a place anymore? I looked at her. That's what we've been doing. She nodded. But let's name it. She handed me a napkin. On it, she'd scribbled the second table. I stared at the words. Soft. Unassuming. But filled with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. That week we moved 2 old tables to the front window. Added a sign, the second table. No reservation. No judgment. By Friday, they were full. People came not because the food was perfect, but because the silence wasn't empty anymore. Because someone waited for their story. Not to fix. Just to hear it. And slowly, without announcement, without fanfare. I was building what they had tried to erase. By the end of the month, the second table had a waiting list. Not for reservations. But for memory. People brought recipes from mothers long gone. Photos folded soft from wallets never opened. One woman, Denise, came in with a shoebox full of letters her sister never read. She read them aloud to no one in particular. And no one interrupted. April made a chalkboard. Each week, a new word. Welcome. Stay. You matter. No hashtags. No donation jars. Just warmth made visible. Then one afternoon, the door chimed and Julia walked in. Alone. No announcement. No camera in hand. No mom in her voice. She looked around. Eyes scanning the walls, the booths, the counter. Her gaze landed on me. But I didn't move. I stayed behind the register quiet. She stepped closer. Touched the jar labeled for coffee or courage. Then looked at the chalkboard. That week's word was return. She exhaled, then asked, "This place. It's yours." I nodded. She blinked. Bit her lip. It feels different. I didn't reply. Because sometimes what needs to be said already hangs in the air. She glanced toward the second table. All seats were full. I didn't know where you went, she said. I met her eyes. I never went anywhere. You just stopped seeing me. A pause. Not heavy. Just real. Then she nodded. Slow. Before she left, she placed something in the jar. A folded grocery list. I opened it later. On the back, a note in her handwriting. I remember the oatmeal. And the way you used to cut the toast diagonal. I'm sorry. I didn't cry. But I did add her name to the back of the chalkboard. Not to erase the past. But to leave room for return. Because this place was never about revenge. It was about making sure that no one else had to sit alone in a life they built. Not if I could help it. Not while I still had a diner, a key, and enough strength to keep the coffee warm. The newspaper came on a Thursday. Folded clean. No pages missing. Page 3, bottom corner, a photo of Dot's place. My name beneath it. Local woman revives beloved diner. April clipped it to the corkboard. Customers pointed. Smiled. I didn't. Not because I wasn't proud. But because pride had long stopped being loud. That afternoon, the diner buzzed. Carol brought banana bread. Mr. Blake taught Olivia how to shuffle cards on the counter. Letty sang half a hymn while buttering toast. Then the door chimed. Again. This time Rick walked in. Julia's husband. My son-in-law. The man who once sat at my table and never asked who made the pie. He looked out of place. Collar too pressed. Shoes too clean. He scanned the room and spotted me. I didn't flinch. He approached the counter slowly. Hi, Ruth. I wiped the edge of a mug. Afternoon. He looked around. This place has changed. I nodded. So have I. He cleared his throat. Julia said you bought it. Thought maybe we could talk. I set the mug down. About what? He hesitated. Then pulled out a folded brochure. A family brunch. This Sunday. He slid it toward me. Thought you might want to join. I didn't touch it. Behind him, Letty waved at me from the corner booth. I waved back. Rick followed my gaze. You've been busy. Yes. He offered a small smile. Awkward. Forced. Julia said, you've been distant. I met his eyes. Distant implies I moved. But I stayed in the same town. Same street. Same phone number. A looked down. Then said quietly, she misses you. I said nothing. Because missing is not the same as remembering. Behind me, April refilled a sugar jar. Rick tried again. She said you're always welcome. I finally spoke. Number. She said that to her guests. Not to me. A pause. He looked at the chalkboard above the register. This week's word. Enough. He read it aloud. Then looked back at me. You've made your point. I smiled. I wasn't trying to. Then I turned and refilled the napkin holder at the second table. Because sometimes, justice isn't a gavel. It's a seat someone else forgot you earned. And when they finally notice, you're already serving someone who never looked past you to begin with. Rick left the flyer on the counter. I didn't pick it up. April tossed it in the bin before the dinner crowd arrived. That Sunday, they came. Not for brunch. For proof. Julia. Rick. Both dressed like the visit was a performance. They walked in like they were doing me a kindness. I didn't rush out. I let them wait. Carol waved from the second table. April nodded from behind the counter. Julia spotted me emerging from the kitchen in my apron with a tray of hot biscuits. She opened her mouth to speak, but I walked right past. Placed the biscuits gently in front of a couple celebrating 40 years of quiet loyalty. When I returned, Julia was still standing. I thought maybe we could sit, she said. I pointed to a booth in the corner. Not the second table. Not the window seat. Just space. She sat. Rick followed. I didn't. I stood. Because the last time I sat at a table with them, I had no voice. I saw the article Julia started. You've really made something here. I nodded once. It's not for you, though. She looked surprised. What? I leaned in. You made your table. Remember? She blinked. The silence dragged. Rick reached into his coat. Pulled out a small envelope. Just a little something. To help with startup costs. He slid it across the table. I didn't touch it. I don't take tips from people who don't make reservations. I looked confused. Julia frowned. We're trying. I smiled. But it didn't reach my eyes. I know. But trying isn't the same as showing up when it's hard. When it's inconvenient. When it's me. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. Today's word, I said, pointing toward the chalkboard, is boundaries. They stood slowly. Defeated, I don't know. Butskete. At the door, Julia turned. You really won't come to brunch? I paused. Then said, there's already a table with my name on it. And people waiting to be seen. She nodded. Not in anger. Not in guilt. Just in understanding. Then they left. And the second table never once missed a beat. Letty told her joke. Carol rolled her eyes. April slid another pie into the oven. Outside, a breeze tugged the diner sign gently. The word open blinked steady and soft. Just like justice ought to be. That evening, the sky turned lavender. I stayed late. April locked up. But I remained. The booths were empty now. Plates cleared. Napkins folded. Coffee pots rinsed and drying on the rack. I walked slowly, tracing the edge of each table with my fingertips. At the second table, someone had left a note. Folded in half. Tucked under the sugar jar. I opened it. A child's handwriting. It read, "Thank you for giving my grandma a place." No name. Just a crayon heart. I sat in the booth and let the quiet return. Not the same silence from months ago. Not the heavy kind that settles on your chest like grief you forgot to put down. This silence was whole. Full of stories. Laughter. Bread passed and hands held. I took out my notebook. The same one where I once wrote just one word. Space. Now it had pages. Full of names. Full of moments I never planned but had lived into. I flipped to the last page and wrote, "Justice isn't loud. It's steady. It's a chair pulled out for someone who thought they had been forgotten." Then I turned off the lights. Walked toward the door. Before locking it, I looked back once. At the counter. The chalkboard. The pie case with one slice left just because Letty said she'd come back tomorrow. I left it there. Because I believed her. Outside, the wind was gentle. The sign still glowed. A woman walked past. Then paused. She looked at the windows. At the words written in chalk. Then at me. "Is it too late for tea?" I smiled. Opened the door again. "Not if you need it." She stepped inside. I brewed the pot. Set 2 cups. No questions. Just presence. We sat. We sipped. We listened to nothing in particular. And when she left, she turned and said, "I haven't been invited anywhere in months." I replied, "You just were." Then locked the door. And knew. This was the justice I had longed for. Not the kind that demands apology. But the kind that builds again. Quietly. On the very ground where someone once told you you didn't belong. It has been 6 months since the first slice of pie was traded for a story. Now they come even when it rains. Especially when it rains. The second table fills early. Some come alone. Some with photos or folded recipes, or just their hands tucked in their lap waiting to be held. There's a rhythm to it now. April knows who likes their eggs soft. I know who likes their silence softer. We keep a drawer of postcards. Stamped. Blank. Waiting. People write to people they no longer speak to. Sometimes they mail them. Sometimes they fold them into the jar. One woman wrote a letter to the version of herself she once left behind. Signed it forgiven. No one laughed. No one asked. We just made space and kept the coffee warm. Letty's grandson now stops by after school. Wipes tables. Eats 2 muffins, then says it was just one. We pretend not to notice. Carol brings clippings from her garden. They wilt by afternoon. But we keep them in jars anyway. Because beauty, even short-lived, belongs on the table too. Julia has not returned. But last week a bouquet arrived. No card. Just dahlias. Her favorite. I didn't say anything. But I kept them by the window where the light could reach. One evening, a woman asked if she could host her book club in the corner booth. I said yes. They stayed 3 hours. Laughed so loud, the ceiling fan rattled. Later she pressed my hand and whispered, "I haven't laughed like that since before the divorce." I nodded. Poured her one more cup for the road. Not everything has healed. Some names still sting. Some silences still stretch too long. But the diner holds it, like a grandmother's lap, big enough for sorrow, wide enough for joy. I no longer count customers. I count chairs filled, hands warmed, eyes softened. Some nights I light a single candle at the second table. No reason, no ceremony. Just to say someone mattered. Because they did. Because they do. Last night, the wind came through the side window. Blew out the candle before I could. I left it that way. Some endings don't need flame. Just breath. When I got home, the porch light was still on. I never used to leave it. But now I do. Because someone might need it. Even if they never knock. The next morning, I opened early. April had the flu. So it was just me. The bell rang slow. Familiar. Carol brought me her cinnamon rolls. Said they were too dry. She was wrong. Letty forgot her wallet. Left a flower instead. At noon, a girl came in. Barely 20. Eyes red. Voice quiet. She didn't order. Just asked, "Is this the place with the second table?" I nodded. She sat down. Held her phone in her lap like it might disappear if she let it go. After a while, I brought her tea. Lavender. She cried. Didn't explain. I didn't ask. I just stayed. And when she finally looked up, she whispered. I thought I had nowhere left. I smiled. You do now. She nodded. Then added, my grandma used to say places can hold people long after they're gone. I looked around. At the worn booths. The scuffed floor. The clock that chimed 2 minutes late every hour. Yes, I said. Yes, they can. That night I set the last place at the second table. A cloth napkin. A chipped plate. And a small card that read, "You belong here." Then I sat beside it. Alone. But not lonely. Because the room was full of everything they tried to erase. My story. My chair. My voice. I do not know if Julia will come again. Or if Rick ever understood what he took. But I know this. Somewhere, someone is still setting a table and wondering if they're allowed to sit. To them I say, yes. You are allowed. You've always been. You don't need an invitation to your own story. Just a place to begin again. And maybe if you ever find yourself in a town with a quiet street and a little diner with a chalkboard that says welcome, come in. The pie is warm. The seat is open. The silence is kind. And you are not forgotten. What quiet place helped you feel seen again? We invite you to share your story in the comments below. You are not alone. Your journey matters. Subscribe to Grandma Radio, where every story is a second chance.